speak to my favourite, the veteran, the OG, the Don, Mr. Trevor Kavanagh, former political editor of The Sun. Good morning, Trevor.
Good to be with you, Alex.
What is going on? Because we can look at this through the prism of cuts in police. We can look at this through the prism of maybe austerity. I think there is something else because, you know, we've always had knives in this country. We've always had trains in this country. We didn't have to have knife arches. We didn't have to have stop and search. So why is it in 2025 so many people are essentially going out and stabbing other people?
Well, it's difficult to answer that specifically, but before I do, I'd like to echo your words about the hero train guard who came to the rescue of so many members of the public. And having once briefly been threatened with a knife, I can tell you it is absolutely terrifying. And the fact that he more or less voluntarily went into the area of danger, ran into danger himself, and suffered grievously as a result is a tremendous tribute to that courage that you mentioned.
Yeah.
As for the explosion of assaults and violence and stabbings on public transport, basically that's a reflection of society at large. In the cities and towns of this country, knives are carried routinely, not just by adults with malice aforethought in their minds, but even in school and school children. We've had, in fact, recently the case of a teenager being stabbed to death by another teenager in the vicinity of the school. So, you know, I think that one of the ways that we could combat this is to use stop and search, not necessarily in the form that is opposed so bitterly by the left because it is allegedly racist, but indiscriminately and spontaneously. For instance, I think we should put up metal detectors around the exits of tube stations every now and again, or some other point at which large numbers emerge and can be identified. And before they can get away, they are going through the metal detectors. I think if you did that every now and again, not at one particular point all the time, but just every now and again, you would stop people carrying knives if they were stopped in their tracks like that.
But I wonder as well, I mean, there's got to be something else we can do. Not to sound a bit like David Cameron, hug a hoodie, I actually see woke at the heart of a lot of these problems. I think there's been, again, the sort of woke element of not doing stop and search because, oh, you might be racially profiling someone. There's also been this woke two-tier policing when it comes to psychosis-inducing drugs and which communities the police are prepared to go after for dealing and possession. There's also been a wokeification of some of the most horrific online content, from drill music to these grievance narratives, to violent videos online, a glorification of violence. We know we've got increasing psychosis rates, particularly within a certain community, which is then, I think you're 10 times more likely if you have a predisposition towards psychosis, if you then smoke cannabis, to actually have a psychotic episode. And if you have psychosis, you're 10 times more likely to end up in prison. But we're still not talking about those things, again, for fear, it seems to me, of being painted with the accusation of being xenophobic or racist.
Well, yes, and we're also suffering the problem, I think, of fatherless families. This is a long and deep-seated problem in society generally, not just in any particular minority, but in society generally, where there are far more single parents in Britain than in many countries in Europe. And I think that reflects itself in the way that children grow up, often being disciplined not by their parents, but by their peer group, which in some cases are gangs. And so knife carrying is a way of life. And this is coupled with other forms of delinquency is the answer, I suppose, in terms of pot smoking and skunk smoking, which is not just pot, it's really quite a powerful mind-altering drug. And the point that psychiatrists make is that once you alter the mind in that way, there is no guarantee that it will return to the way it was before.
No, I think we definitely need a national conversation about this. I recently wrote a Substack on it, but I still don't think we're ready to have that conversation out loud. Let's indeed have a conversation out loud instead about the BBC, because let's remind ourselves of the clip that is so evidently doctored by Panorama.
Yes, I think
we're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
I mean, look, Trev, people listening to this know full well you and I are exchanging opinions, but this isn't a matter of opinion on Panorama. As far as I can tell, this is the deliberate deception through doctoring actuality.
Yes, and as I say, this story, if it weren't for the violence and other catastrophes going on at the same time, would be the biggest story of the day. This is the BBC, our national broadcaster, doctoring evidence deliberately in order to malign the President of the United States of America. I mean, all journalists do things with copy and quotes, which is intended to abbreviate what someone's saying without altering the substance of their intentions. That's called subbing or sub-editing. So this is something totally different. This is the deliberate and systematic and quite complicated distortion of the events that took place, which reflect extremely badly on Donald Trump, or did at the time until this emerged as being the real story. And it has been cast in order to make him look as if he was trying to rouse the rebels into violence. This is the incoming President of the United States, in fact, trying to douse the flames.
Now, indeed. And what do you think the outcome should be of this? I mean, you know, people are saying Tim Davies should be the one whose head should roll. I'm not really hearing much about the editorial staff of that particular episode of Panorama, although I have personally looked into them. But what I think is likely to happen if Donald Trump does file some sort of lawsuit against the BBC, and let's not forget that especially BBC World is available throughout the planet, so could well have had an American audience, is if there is some sort of libel levelled against the BBC, the likelihood is, Trevor, that those of us who pay the licence fee, which I still do, we're the ones who have to pick up the tab.
Well, I'm seriously thinking of following Charles Moore of the Telegraph and ceasing to pay my licence fee after this, and I think millions might feel the same way. I mean, this has been revealed in a report by Michael Prescott, who I know very well as the former political editor of the Sunday Times, a man of unimpeachable integrity, who is outraged by the way this has not just been carried out by Panorama, but the way that the BBC hierarchy, including the chairman, has refused even to address the situation until the point where Michael Prescott's report has been leaked and has become part of the public domain. It is only now that they're looking at what was an outrageous breach of journalistic integrity by the BBC, quite unforgivable, irreparable, and I think there will be consequences, not just from the board of the BBC, but from the White House, because this has vindicated the view of the White House and President Trump and his family in particular, that there is a fake media out there. Well, we did know that, but we didn't think it included the BBC.
Yeah, no, I agree. There needs to be at some point with the BBC the final thing, the final straw that makes real change happen, and it seems yet to have come to pass. Let's hope that this incident will actually make the scales fall away from people's eyes and the BBC finally face some sort of accountability. Talking about accountability, Rachel Reeves not taking any in her deliberate contextualisation of the doom and gloom she's going to level against the rest of us at the end of the month. I mean, this did seem to me to be an exercise in fluffing us ready for what is going to be a pretty gruesome budget. But it's again, she blames everyone else but herself. The buck stops with you, Rachel, surely.
Well, I think the buck stopped with Rachel Reeves when she delivered her last budget. That was the moment. If she felt, excuse me, if she felt genuinely that there was a 20 billion black hole, should have taken the measures at the beginning of a new government with a huge majority to rectify it by cutting the vast welfare spending bill and the national debt that goes with it. And if she did none of those things, in fact, she balked at the very opportunity that the government tried to adopt to cut heating allowances and so on. Very badly chosen examples, admittedly, but they have no will whatsoever to cut the welfare bill, which is crippling this country. And until they do, they will never be able to cut taxes, and in fact will always have to increase taxes incrementally, or in this case, in the budget, quite substantially by an estimated 2p in the pound across the board for all income tax.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps to me, what were the most standout points of her speech were the things that she did not say when she's sort of addressing the culpability for why we're in such an economic mess. Of course, it's all the Tories, Vladimir Putin, throwing a bit of Brexit, some supply chains, China, Trump, of course, and tariffs. You know, it's basically the right wing are to blame. And yet she doesn't seem to recognise that things like the sheer cost of illegal immigration, the welfare bill of foreign nationals who, quite frankly, we shouldn't be propping up. She didn't seem to talk about any of those things. I think exactly the things that she did not mention are the areas where the general public are most likely to be pointing the finger of blame.
Yes, and not to mention the cost that goes with illegal immigration. I mean, it is vast, and the crime that goes with that too. But the thing is that they keep blaming everyone else, as you say. They blame Brexit, they blame the last Tory government. But they've now been in office for nearly 18 months. And they're running out of excuses. And I think the opinion polls are revealing that the public is fed up with them blaming everyone else and refusing to take any blame of their own disastrous policies, which have led to many of the problems we're facing today.
Now, there's been a bit of sort of, let's say, prequels and sequels to Rachel Reeves' contextualisation. The prequel coming from Nigel Farage, who has said he will not be cutting taxes until he manages to stabilise the country's economy, should he be our next Prime Minister. Kemi Badenoch basically saying that it was a load of waffle, a waffle bomb. I mean, it does seem to me that whoever is going to wrest control of the nation's budget, it's still not going to be good news for a very long time to come.
No, I'm afraid that's true. And we are in for a fairly bleak time. You've seen the pound has slumped against all foreign currencies. That's as a result of what Rachel Reeves said this morning, and it will probably slump further after the budget. That's not good news for our exporters and importers, or for the consumers. I think that Nigel Farage's speech, to be fair to him, actually, is a breath of fresh air, because he's finally addressing the elephant in the room, which is that if he were to win power, he is unlikely to have an overwhelming majority, but he needs to have policies ready to go which show that he is ready to govern. And I think the economy, apart from migration, which is, of course, the key issue when it comes to reforms ascent in the polls, the economy is really the biggest thing apart from that. And so far, we've heard very little from him on that. Now, at last, we see that he recognizes that we cannot sustain the huge national debt that's crushing our economy at the moment.
No, indeed. I mean, I think a lot of people listening to what Nigel Farage had to say would be, well, look, if we can make those cuts in welfare, if the people who are not contributing are the ones being held to account, whomever they will be, then we might be a bit more prepared to shoulder some of the burden. Let's talk now about Rochdale Grooming ringleader who's been banned from returning to Britain. I mean, great. He's fled the country. The police were supposed to be doing checkups to make sure he's at home and not doing bad things. Well, the checkups couldn't have been that watertight because he has absconded. And the response is, well, great, you've gone out, but you're not going to be allowed back in. The point is, though, if he's fled to Europe, he could just be sitting in the Costa del Sol living his best life. It doesn't seem to me like he's facing justice.
No, and I wish we had stopped calling them groomers. I mean, this man is a rapist. He raped a 13-year-old and impregnated a 13-year-old, among many other offences that he committed, and was struggling to avoid deportation. We should have deported him. He shouldn't have done a runner. We should have deported him years ago.
Yeah.
And the immigration tribunals, which decide this, the Home Office itself, decided that he couldn't be deported because, as he claimed, his son would lose a role model. I mean, where does that sort of justification come from? So it's good that he's not being allowed to come back, but he should never have been allowed to stay here in the first place once he'd been convicted.
No, I totally agree. And I think actually if we did turn around to Pakistan and say, we want to send all these people back to you, and I think most of Pakistan looks very dimly upon this sort of behaviour, I think Pakistan would probably play ball, quite frankly, especially if they knew that there was something at stake, for example, foreign aid. I don't know why we're not being more assertive over this. No doubt it's got something to do with the ECHR, of which it's the 75th birthday today. You'll be pleased to know, Trevor. Happy birthday to the European Convention.
Yeah.
Not so many happy returns. But hopefully you will return, because I always love catching up with you, Trev. Trevor Kavanagh, their former political editor of The Sun. The King. Right.